There's a quiet kind of betrayal that doesn't come with a scream. It comes with a smile, a thank you, a handshake. It comes disguised as friendship, as opportunity, as being needed. And most dangerously, it comes with your own permission. Because the truth is, no one can use you without your silent agreement. No one can manipulate you without your unconscious cooperation. And most people don't even realize they've been handing over the steering wheel of their lives, piece by piece, favor by favor, apology by apology, until one day they look in the mirror and don't even recognize the reflection. You were not born to be a servant to the expectations of others. You were not built to be a machine for someone else's dream. And yet, how many times have you bitten your tongue, lowered your standards, quieted your voice, just to be accepted, needed, or liked? Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." But let me tell you what's even more dangerous than avoiding your soul. It's letting someone else own it. This isn't just about saying no. It's about reclaiming your identity from every silent contract you've made to keep the peace, to stay agreeable, to avoid conflict, at the cost of your own truth. You think you're being kind? You think you're being supportive? But what if I told you your kindness has become your cage? What if I told you that every time you said yes when your gut said no, you were reinforcing the idea that your time, your energy, your attention belonged to someone else? That's not generosity. That's slavery in a modern form, emotional servitude disguised as virtue. Let that sink in, because the world isn't short on people who will take advantage of that. Your workplace, your family, your so-called friends. They don't even have to try hard. You give so much of yourself away that they forget it's even a gift. It becomes expected, entitled, automatic. You stop being a person. You become a resource. And the more valuable you are, the more they'll drain you, until your silence is no longer a virtue. It's a weapon used against you, until your reliability becomes a reason to never check on you, until your helpfulness becomes the very reason they never help you back. And yet, you stay. You endure. You call it loyalty. You call it being strong. But that's not strength. That's self-abandonment. And self-abandonment always has a price. Burnout, depression, resentment. The quiet, aching realization that you've become a stranger in your own life. You want to stop being used. Then stop apologizing for having needs. Stop shrinking yourself just to fit into other people's agendas. Stop setting yourself on fire just to keep everyone else warm. This is not about revenge. It's about responsibility. It's about seeing clearly the role you play in the very dynamics that are draining you. Because nothing changes until you do. The first step is mindset. You have to believe, not just intellectually, but deep in your bones, that you are not less for protecting your boundaries. You are not selfish for guarding your energy. You are not unkind for refusing to be used. This world does not reward people who give endlessly. It rewards people who give wisely. There's a difference. Some will call you hard. Some will say you've changed. Yes, because you have. You've stopped performing a role that kept everyone else comfortable, while keeping you invisible. And if being kind meant becoming invisible, then maybe you were never being kind at all. Maybe you were just afraid. Afraid of being rejected. Afraid of being seen as difficult. Afraid of being alone. But let me ask you, what kind of company is it if you have to betray yourself to keep it? This is where belief comes in. You must believe, truly, audaciously, that your time, your energy, your vision are sacred. You must begin to live with the conviction that says, I will no longer trade my peace for approval. I will no longer mistake guilt for growth. I will no longer negotiate my worth. Because you don't attract respect by demanding it. You attract respect by embodying it. And that begins in the silence of your own mind. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That unconscious part of you, the part that craves approval, that avoids conflict, that fears judgment, it's been running the show for too long. But now the lights are on. Now the shadow has a name. Now you take the reins. Not by fighting others, but by confronting the parts of you that allowed it. You see, every pattern that poisons you had a purpose once. It kept you safe. It made you likable. It helped you survive in rooms where your truth wasn't welcome. But survival is not living, and comfort is not freedom. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being small was safer, that agreeing was easier than asserting, that pleasing was more valuable than power. But you were not born to be agreeable. You were born to be whole. You were born to disturb the waters, to speak with fire in your chest and clarity in your spine. And that clarity, it's the next step, the kind of clarity that slices through confusion like lightning through a storm. Clarity about who you are, what you will and will not allow. Clarity about the cost of your silence and the value of your presence. When you are clear, truly clear, people stop asking you to bend, because they know you won't. They feel it in your tone. They sense it in your posture. It radiates from you, not as arrogance, but as sacred certainty. This is where most people fail. They want boundaries without clarity. They want peace without confrontation. They want love without self-respect. But you cannot build a powerful life on vague expectations and whispered truths. You must speak. You must decide. You must cut away the noise until what remains is you, raw, honest, unshakable. That's how vision is born. Not from fantasy, but from ruthless clarity. From seeing who you've been and choosing, finally, who you will become. And you must become. Because the version of you who gets used, tolerated, dismissed, is not the version of you that's going to build the life you were meant for. Jung taught us that the shadow must be integrated, not ignored. You must look at the part of you that allowed yourself to be used, not with judgment, but with understanding. Why did you let it happen? Why did you keep giving when you were empty? Why did you stay silent when your soul was screaming? Maybe you were afraid of conflict. Maybe you were taught that love is earned through sacrifice. Maybe you thought your value was in being useful. But let me ask you this. If they stopped needing you tomorrow, would they still choose you? If your value only exists when you serve, then you were never seen as a person, only a tool. And that truth should break you open. Not into pieces, but into light, because when you finally see the pattern, you can destroy it. When you finally see how you've betrayed yourself, not out of weakness, but out of wounded love, you can reclaim your power, not with rage, but with intention. You stop trying to fix people who drain you. You stop over-explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop entertaining half-hearted connections, one-sided loyalty, and conditional love. You get intentional. You begin to curate your circle the way a master craftsman chooses tools, deliberately, precisely, without apology. Your time becomes scarce because your purpose becomes loud. You stop attending battles that aren't yours. You stop pouring into people who poke holes in your container. You stop arguing with people who benefit from your confusion. Because clarity isn't just power, it's peace. And peace is the highest form of wealth. Do not mistake this for isolation. This isn't about building walls. It's about building gates. This isn't about closing off. It's about choosing who enters. There is a difference between being alone and being aligned. And alignment is where purpose lives. Because once you stop being used, once you reclaim your soul from every person who misused your kindness, you make room for something greater, your mission. The world is waiting for that version of you. The version who isn't buried under obligation. The version who isn't constantly questioning, explaining, or negotiating their worth. The version who speaks in full sentences, walks with full presence, and lives with full conviction. That version of you does not tolerate being used because they are too busy being useful to the right causes, to the right people, to the right future. That version of you knows the difference between being needed and being valued, and they will never again confuse the two. But let's not pretend this path is easy. The moment you choose yourself, the world pushes back. Not because you're wrong, but because you've changed. Because you're no longer feeding what was starving you. Because you've become unfamiliar to those who only knew your unhealed self. And when people can no longer manipulate you, they'll call you selfish. They'll call you cold. They'll say you've changed. And you know what? They're right. You have changed. You've outgrown your cage. You've stopped being available for your own erosion. This is where discipline enters, because this awakening isn't a one-time moment. It's a daily choice. 100 micro decisions that say, I choose what aligns with my soul. Not what's comfortable, not what keeps the peace, not what earns applause. You see, the chains that hold us are rarely physical. They are made of guilt, of habit, of misplaced loyalty. And the key to breaking them is discipline. The discipline to say no even when your voice shakes. The discipline to walk away before your worth is negotiated. The discipline to build in silence, to rise without permission, to be misunderstood and still stay rooted. Think of every legend you admire. Lincoln, Mandela, Eleanor Roosevelt. They weren't liked by everyone. They weren't understood in real time. They were too focused on legacy to waste time on being liked. Your growth will trigger those still sleeping in the comfort of your old self. Let them sleep. You've got a war to win. But this war isn't external. It's internal. It's between the you that wants to stay safe and the you that was born to be sovereign. Because here's the truth. You can't save anyone by sacrificing yourself. You can't fix people who benefit from being broken. You can't love people into wholeness if they are committed to their wounds. Your job is not to be useful to people who only want your energy, but never your essence. Your job is to be faithful to your own becoming. And becoming demands that you burn the false version of you, the one who tolerated too much, explained too much, gave too much, and rebuild from ashes, from truth, from the parts of you that remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Because somewhere, buried beneath the people-pleasing, beneath the overgiving, beneath the tired smile and the polite silence, is a lion, a king, a queen, a sovereign soul with fire in their chest and purpose in their blood. And that version of you, they don't chase validation. They don't beg to be chosen. They don't shrink to fit into fragile egos and broken systems. They stand, even if it means standing alone, even if it means being called difficult, arrogant, cold, intimidating, because they know what it cost to finally see. To see how many years were wasted waiting for approval, to see how much energy was spent keeping the peace in rooms that were burning them alive. That version of you has boundaries sharp as steel and love deep as oceans. Not because they've closed their heart, but because they've finally guarded it. This is not about bitterness. This is not about revenge. This is about truth, about reclaiming what was always yours, your time, your voice, your value, your life. And once you reclaim it, the game changes. Because the moment you stop being used, you become unstoppable. You start creating from vision instead of reaction. You start building from identity instead of insecurity. You start moving not from obligation, but from calling. Everything that once drained you becomes fuel. Every no becomes a sacred boundary. Every exit becomes an elevation. And most importantly, you stop looking outside for permission because you've realized something the world hopes you never figure out, that your worth is not in how much you give, but in how deeply you know yourself. When you know yourself truly deeply, the world loses its power to define you. You no longer bend to fit into spaces that were never built for you. You no longer dim your brilliance just to make someone else feel comfortable in their shadows. You rise, not with arrogance, but with clarity, with presence, with sacred certainty. And in that clarity, you begin to see what once blinded you. The people who only called when they needed something. The friends who disappeared when you had nothing to give. The lovers who loved your silence more than your truth. The systems that applauded your suffering and labeled it selflessness. You start to understand what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate." That wasn't just philosophy, that was warning. A call to arms. Because most people walk through life asleep, thinking they're making choices, when they're really just repeating patterns. Patterns of appeasement, patterns of suppression, patterns of performance. And the tragic part, they think they're being good, they think they're being kind, they think they're being loving, but they're just being used by others, by old wounds, by the fear of being alone. Wake up. Goodness without boundaries is self-destruction. Kindness without clarity is manipulation waiting to happen. Love without self-respect is just a slow erosion of the soul. You were not born to be drained. You were not born to be someone's emotional landfill. You were not born to be a character in someone else's drama. You were born to build, to lead, to become. And becoming requires sacrifice. You will lose people. You will lose illusions. You will lose entire identities you once clung to like lifeboats. But what you gain is freedom. Freedom from the compulsive need to be understood. Freedom from the guilt that kept you in cages. Freedom from the fear of disappointing others. And in that freedom, you'll finally taste what real power feels like. Not dominance, not control, but sovereignty. The power to speak your truth without trembling. The power to walk away from anything that asks you to betray yourself. The power to be misunderstood and not need to explain. The power to choose peace over approval every single time. And when you do this, when you finally choose yourself, you'll notice something miraculous. You stop attracting users. You stop being a magnet for narcissists, manipulators, energy thieves. Because your frequency changes, your boundaries become energetic armor. Your silence becomes sacred, and your presence begins to say what your words used to scream, "I know who I am now, and I will not be used." But make no mistake, this isn't the end. This is the beginning. Because once you reclaim yourself, you must build yourself, brick by brick, day by day. You create a new internal structure, one rooted not in fear but in truth. You build routines that nourish your vision. You speak words that align with your future. You make decisions not based on comfort but on calling. You stop proving and start embodying. You stop chasing and start creating. You stop asking and start claiming. And from that place, from that deep, unshakable center, you become dangerous. Not because you hurt others, but because you can no longer be controlled, because your worth is no longer up for negotiation, because you've become what the world fears most, a fully awakened human, one who sees clearly, one who gives with discernment, one who loves without losing themselves, one who refuses to be used ever again. You weren't made to stay small. That's the lie you inherited from broken systems, from wounded parents, from a world that profits off your confusion. They told you to be humble, so you became invisible. They told you to be selfless, so you abandoned yourself. They told you to be agreeable, so you betrayed your voice. And in the process, they trained you to be used. But now you see. Now the veil has lifted, and with eyes wide open you remember. This is not who you are. You are not the echo of someone else's expectations. You are not the servant of someone else's story. You are the fire, the force, the storm that no longer apologizes for its thunder. You don't need permission to walk away. You don't need consensus to be free. You don't need anyone's validation to take your power back. Because healing isn't about making them understand. It's about finally understanding yourself. It's about recognizing the patterns that kept you locked in loops of giving without return, loving without respect, offering without honor. And then breaking them, not with bitterness, not with vengeance, but with sacred defiance, the kind of defiance that says, I will no longer shrink to make others comfortable. I will no longer silence my needs to keep the peace. I will no longer confuse being needed with being loved. You owe it to yourself, to the child you once were, to the elder you will one day become. To live without chains, to choose love that doesn't require your suffering, to build a life that doesn't ask you to disappear. And when they come back, because they always do, the users, the takers, the ones who only loved the version of you that gave and gave until there was nothing left, you will smile with strength. You will bless them with silence. You will walk on, because you no longer owe anyone an explanation for your evolution. You've traded being liked for being respected. You've traded being used for being whole. You've traded survival for sovereignty. This is what it means to awaken. This is what it means to reclaim the throne of your own mind. To no longer be the puppet of guilt, the prisoner of fear, the plaything of others' expectations. To no longer leak your energy into relationships that don't nourish you. You give, but with discernment. You serve, but with boundaries. You love, but never at the cost of your own soul. And now you walk with a different kind of power. A quiet power. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself. The kind that isn't loud or loud-mouthed, but unmistakably felt in every room you enter. The kind of power that comes from wholeness, not from pretending. That comes from clarity, not from performance. You've stopped begging to be chosen. You've started choosing yourself. And that changes everything. Because in a world where everyone's trying to be needed, to be wanted, to be liked, you've decided to be free. Let them talk. Let them twist your story. Let them miss the version of you they could use. You are no longer here for that. You are here to build. You are here to create. You are here to lead, not follow. To heal, not perform. To thrive, not just survive. No longer a servant. No longer a victim. No longer unconscious. You are the author now. And your story is no longer written by their hands. So when the world asks you to shrink again, when the past tries to seduce you back into old patterns, when the takers come with smiles and sweet lies, remember who you've become. And say with unshakable conviction, I know who I am now, and I will never be used again.